morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our February 2019 customer webinar. Today, Patty Bristol, AdOps Program Manager at TownNews, is here to share some tips and best practices to help you better optimize your overall digital advertising inventory. We also have Teresa Nelson, Director of New Business Development, and Stevie Longwith, Digital Ad Operations Manager, on the call in order to answer questions later. I'm Cherry Wolf, Marketing Specialist for TownNews. The presentation will take about 30 minutes and a Q&A will follow. At any point, you can type a question into the chat box, but we'll wait to answer them at the end. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available early next week. Patty, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Patty Bristol, AdOps Manager at TownNews.com, at TownNews. And today we're going to talk about digital advertising. We're going to go over some commonly used terms, though some jargon that you might hear, a little bit about how to generate revenue from both local and programmatic ad sales. We're going to talk about ECPM as a key metric to track revenue growth and some tips for packaging and pricing digital ad inventory, specifically display ad and video inventory. We're going to start out with some industry information and guidelines. Just to level set, what is internet advertising? In a nutshell, any way that you can deliver a promotional advertisement and make money using internet technology. So it's not just display, it's not just video, it's subscriptions, widgets, photo sales, the whole big bucket of things. So it's always important when you're talking about digital advertising to remember there's a whole world out there, and they kind of narrow into what it is specifically that you're looking at. Next, we're going to go over some of the industry jargon, the industry terms. I'm not going to read the slide to you, but there are a couple of these I want to point out really quickly. First of all, local versus programmatic. In this instance, we're talking about local advertising as the digital advertising that is sold directly to an advertiser by the publisher. Programmatic in this instance is the automated bidding ad networks that would take up your remnant. Also, the difference between CPM and ECPM. CPM is cost per thousand impressions. So, for example, I am going to sell you 50,000 run-of-site impressions at a $10 ECPM, or excuse me, a $10 CPM. CPM is my cost per thousand. That $10 is what it's going to cost you. The ECPM is the effective cost per thousand impressions, and that's a formula to get the average of what you are either making or even charging for your advertising. So, for example, you might have that 50,000 run a site at $10. Maybe you've got a high impact campaign going at a $25 CPM. Your eCPM is going to be the average cost per thousand impressions that you're making altogether. The last one I really want to highlight to you is RPM, revenue per thousand pages. And the reason I want to highlight that is when we're talking about that big bucket of digital advertising, sometimes that's the metric that binds everything together. Not everything is going to lend itself to a cost per thousand impressions model. Some metrics that really matter, there's a couple of these I want to go over with you too. Viewability, of course, is huge, and you've probably heard us talk about that before. An impression is considered viewable when at least 50% of the ad is in the viewport for 1 second. Your viewability rate is the percentage of ads that count as being viewed. That is incredibly important for programmatic. The higher your viewability rate, the more the network advertisers are willing to bid for your impression. I also want to highlight the difference between fill rate and sell-through rate. When we talk about a fill rate, we're talking about the percent of your remnant impressions that you send off to be bidded on programmatically that are then filled and monetized. So if you're in the TownNews IQ program, you're getting a report for the prior month at the first of the month after, and usually mid-month, and we calculate out, among other things, the fill rate for you on that. Your sell-through rate is the percentage of your ad impressions that you have sold locally. So they're two different metrics there. We're talking about two different things. And of course, I can't talk about industry standards of any sort without talking about the Better Ad Standards. The Better Ad Standards were put together by a group of the larger IAB member advertisers, really led by Google, to make a better ad experience for users and advertisers. And they've come up with a list of guidelines to follow. And I always say, know these and love these because there's penalties for not being in alignment with these. Google will actually cut off all the display ads on your site for users in a Chrome browser. So check in your Google Search Console tools, make sure that you're in good standing with them, and that will go a long ways towards making sure that your revenue stays steady. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about generating revenue. Again, digital advertising is more than just the banner ads. All kinds of things, paid recommendations, widgets, events, any kind of contest you might have. But today, we're going to focus in on display and video ads. Director local sales, we talked about this a little bit before, handled by an in-house sales team, negotiated directly with the advertisers. And ideally, your local ad packages are offering customized high-impact placements, things that an advertiser could not possibly get from a programmatic ad buy. Your ECPMs on these should be at a minimum 5 times higher than what you're getting on programmatic, just as sort of a bare minimum benchmark. And I chose this picture here. So this is a screenshot from a website called mainstreetpreps.com. And I think they're doing something absolutely brilliant with their very unique audience and ability to target. So, this website is all about the local sports and how the high schoolers are doing. So as you can see, here's the basketball team for White House Heritage High School, and they've bought a sponsorship on this landing page the White House Realtors have. So these realtors specialize in this, specific area. They own it, and it's the perfect match in my opinion. Now, when you get hyper-targeted like this, of course, the volume of impressions tends to be an issue. So this is one part of a package. This is a highly targeted part of a larger package that they offer to local advertisers that I'm not going to give you all of because they'll never tell me anything again if I give away their secret sauce. But I love this as an example because this is the kind of thing that you want to think of. What will really be the most impact to the local advertisers? The other thing is that this business is a really, really good match for this type of inventory. A lot of times, not every local business is a good fit. For example, a more corporate real estate office would probably not understand the value of that hyper-targeting. But these folks understand. These folks understand that the value there is that these people that live in this neighborhood are going to associate them with the neighborhood, and when it's time to sell their house, these are the people that they want to be talking to. So I love this as an example. I just think it's a really brilliant way or a brilliant thing to offer to your local advertisers. Programmatic ad sales. Just a second here. There it goes. So this is our, if you're part of the IQ program, you're familiar with this, kind of the set it and forget it. It goes for remnant or backfill ads. It's an automated auction where national advertisers and sometimes, local franchises will bid on impressions. This isn't nearly as strong of a revenue stream as a local, although it may be the majority of your impressions, it's probably not your largest revenue stream. And that's because it's not worth as much as a local ad sale. For one thing, you're not going to get any high impact ad spots going through an ad network buy. You're getting everyone's remnant. Other than maybe specifying that you want a viewable ad, one that's you can't, an advertiser can't determine where they're going to show up on a site. For that matter, they can't really even determine which sites they're going to show up on outside of the blacklist. We don't want to show up here. So for all these reasons, this is a cheaper buy. It just isn't the same type of quality or placement as buying locally. Next, I want to talk to you a little bit about ECPM. When we're talking about display ads and video ads, this, I think, is the key metric to track to understand how you're doing. This is the formula. Revenue divided by impressions times 1,000. So I recommend calculating this for 3 buckets. First, your local sales, your programmatic sales, and if you're part of the IQ programmatic program, again, that comes on your mid-month and end-of-month reports. That's calculated for you. And then a total for all of your impressions. Remember to include your unfilled ad impressions when you calculate this. For example, some of those high-impact positions that are going to take a 2x1 pixel. And because they're high impact, you don't want to fill them all the time. If there were always a huge expandable ad at the top of the page, it would lose its cachet, so to speak. But it does count into your impressions for your local sales, so you want to be sure to include them when you're calculating out your ECPM. That starts to give you a baseline to set prices and to optimize your inventory and set revenue goals. So this is definitely the metric to go with. Other revenue metrics you might see running around, CPA, cost per acquisition. And right now I bet you're seeing a lot of cost per acquisition ads because it's Valentine's Day. 1-800-Flowers. If someone clicks on the 1-800-Flowers banner on your site and buys flowers, you maybe get 25% of their spend. You see them a lot, Valentine's Day and Mother's Day. You also hear about CPC, cost per click. And about the only place that this really is counted as a metric that you would base monetization on anymore is search. It's just not as important to display. As a matter of fact, they say 8% of internet users account for 85% of all display ad clicks. So while it's an interesting metric, it's not necessarily the one that should have any sway over how you're pricing your display ad inventory. Next, I want to talk a little bit about SOV versus CPM. SOV is share of voice, and that's where you're selling basically a flat fee and it goes in rotation. So, for example, here on this slide, so I'm going to sell, I've got a total of 1 million impressions. I'm going to sell 500,000 to 20 clients, and that should average about a $4 CPM per month. Problem with that is that you can't make any more money than that. And what if you only sell 10 clients? Now you're down to a $2 CPM. Same amount of inventory, but you're making less money because you couldn't sell all the stuff. Whereas cost per 1,000 impressions, you're charging a certain flat rate based on the number of impressions that you deliver. And that is really the way you want to package the majority of your run a site impressions, is into a certain cost per 1,000 impressions. I'll give you a really good example. So after we sent out the January reporting, we got an email from one of our publishers, and she said, "Gee whiz, I made like $2,000 more on the IQ program than I was expecting to make." Not that I'm complaining, but what happened there? Where did my extra $2,000 come from? So we looked into it, and there were some other factors involved, but one of them was that she had an article that went viral, and it generated about 200,000 more ad impressions than what an article usually would. So if that publisher were selling ads according to a share of voice, there wouldn't have been any extra $2,000. It just would have rotated on through, and everybody would have gotten a few extra ad impressions. Instead, they were able to capitalize on that extra traffic and monetize it, make more money. It was a pleasant surprise for a January. Flat fee still works for some products, don't get me wrong. Like for sponsorships are a classic example. 100% share of voice sponsorship is usually a flat fee, and that's about the only place you really see that anymore. But even then, that flat fee is based on an ECPM. You know, what you would want to get if you were selling this individually. They kind of take the ECPM and roll it up to a flat fee. So here's some best practices that we've kind of figured out. First of all, I want to talk about pricing local ads, because there's a certain level of effort with local ads. If you're in the IQ programmatic, you know, as you know, that's plug and play. You know, we handle all of the trafficking, the optimizing, et cetera, so there's literally nothing there. But your local sales are different, and you do need to include that when you're pricing. Somebody's got to implement the campaign. You've got to generate reports on it. Perhaps the salespeople get a commission on it. You've got to bill it. So there's a certain level of effort that goes with those local sales that you want to make sure that you're building into your price. All right, and the other thing here I want to talk about is offering more for local ads. So I want to go back. Well, so first of all, see this right here where Cherry picked me up a little animation. That's a reveal ad. So, you know, basically it's a big ad at the top, and then as the user scrolls on the page, it just kind of covers it up. And we've got a rich media template for that in Google Ad Manager 360. So that's the kind of thing, an advertiser cannot get that programmatically. Those high impact ads simply they're not available. So when you're thinking about what you're offering for local ads, it's important to think about what can you do for your local advertisers that absolutely cannot be done on programmatic that will really make a difference to their business. Part of that is really impactful rich media, you know, really intention-grabbing stuff. So a part of it is, quite frankly, that user engagement with the local content. Again, going back to Main Street Press, it's very, very local. Now, granted, not everybody can target down to the school district, but think about what your website has to offer those local advertisers that no one else does. And that value is where the revenue kind of builds from. Here we go. All right, so maximizing the sell-through rate. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. And one of the things I've seen people do that I think is really, really smart is geo-targeting their locally sold ads to like their local DMA for their coverage area, or maybe city or state, something like that. And then everybody outside of their coverage area, so to speak, gets programmatic. Now, what's smart about that is it does two things. It ups the value for the local advertisers because they're right in front of the users that they're trying to get, the people that are going to be coming and shopping at their local businesses. It also helps out with the programmatic stuff because that means that the programmatic stuff can now pick up, you know, what the different national advertisers are looking for as far as audience, segment, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of a good way of making sure you're not wasting impressions. You're getting the best out of both, so to speak. Another option is to focus on certain ad placements for the different channels. The best example I could come up with is maybe a desktop right rail for your local advertisers and in-story ads for programmatic. It's not a great example, but the idea is that, you know, how do I put it? So I was talking about this presentation to a friend, and she said, well, Patty, remember, all impressions are valuable. And I said, well, yeah, that's true, but not all impressions are equally monetizable. So think about how are those ad placements monetizable? Where do they belong? And sometimes the way to handle it is to kind of split them up a little bit and focus on these placements for your local ads. And another thing is let the local advertisers in when they show up on programmatic. The idea is you want to go and offer something a local advertiser cannot get on programmatic, absolutely cannot get. I was talking to a promotions person day before yesterday, I think, about some of this, and she was saying about how she feels like having some of these local advertisers show up programmatically can reinforce the value of your website, both to local advertisers who might purchase and to users. You know, the thing is, there's probably a lot of local advertisers out there, particularly local franchise advertisers, you know, that just are not necessarily a good fit. But if they are, you've just got to offer them something that isn't available via programmatic. I've pulled this pre-roll video as a good example. So this is right here, local weather forecast for the local auto group on, everybody's going to be watching this. This is a spot that they are not going to get programmatically. It just is not available. So if you let the local advertisers in, I think it really, since it's remnant, it will boost I think the appearance or the gravitas maybe of your site. Two, the impressions that are delivered locally tend to be such a small percentage of that network buy that it's not going to make it, there's not anything that really impacts the bottom line anyway. Kind of an example of where I'm trying to go with this. See, here, I live in Florida, Tallahassee, Florida, and the big grocery store here in Florida is Publix. There are Publixes everywhere. Publix is also in 6 other states. So if I'm a locally focused publisher, let's say that I'm trying to sell ads for a website in Crawfordville, Florida, which is just right down the road from me. I might not have a lot of luck approaching Publix because they're looking for something with a wider spread. However, if I'm talking to Bob's IGA, that local business owner is going to understand exactly the value of being in front of the Crawfordville audience. That's a little bit better match, I guess, is where I'm going. And another thing, think mobile first. If any of you have ever talked to me about anything, you know that I evangelize this. And unfortunately, I'm pretty bad about not always being mobile first in my thought process as well. We're internet people. So all day long, we're on our desktops, we're on our laptops, we're working. But the fact of the matter is, our users are on a mobile device. In 2008, 66% of sessions on all the sites that TownNews hosts were on mobile or tablet. And that was up 8% from the year prior. And I think if you think about how you consume content, actually consume content, not when you're working during the day. I was watching a movie with my husband, and he says, "Hey, how old is Halle Berry?" She's 52, by the way. But I picked up my telephone and my smartphone and looked it up. And I bet you if you think how you're consuming content in your off hours, it's probably on a mobile device. We've got a couple of really good examples here. Mobiles take a 300 by 250, which is also a good desktop size. I love this placement down here. This is a sticky anchor ad. And on mobile, it's a great thing. It's a great thing for local advertisers. It's a great thing for programmatic advertisers. It stays at the bottom of the screen as you scroll. Highly viewable, not intrusive. So you definitely want to pay some attention to mobile because that's where your users are. And we have several blocks CMS features that are going to help out with a lot of this as well. The sticky ads, we talked about the anchor ad on mobile. We also can put an anchor ad on desktop as well. This is a picture of a right rail anchor ad, so that'll stay on the screen as you scroll through the content. Another great thing is the combination of lazy ad loading and ad refresh that's available if you're on a Google Ad Manager server. So lazy ad loading means that the ad won't load until it's within a certain pixel distance of the viewport. So, you're immediately raising your viewability score. Now, ad refresh, if you turn on lazy ad loading and then turn on ad refresh to refresh the ad every 20 seconds in the viewport on user interaction, you can make up some of the impression inventory that you might lose, with that lazy ad loading, not counting an impression until it's, up towards the view screen. But you're also increasing your viewability score because it's refreshing the viewable ad. And the beauty of it being on user interaction is this means you're not refreshing ads and, I've gotten up and wandered off and now my cat is watching them go by. So you're sure the human being is interacting with them. We also have great high impact ad templates for Google Ad Manager 360. Coming soon, we want to kind of do a series of these to kind of dive deeper and deeper into this. So here at some point, we're going to do another one of these about Google Ad Manager 360. It's going to give you a lot of the reporting for the stuff that we're talking about. Viewability, ECPM, a lot of tools to really wrap your arms around your digital display and video inventory and, do good things. So some takeaways. Develop impactful ad packages for local advertisers. Think about what they can get from you and nowhere else. When you're setting goals for your local and programmatic sales, make sure that you're including ECPM somewhere in there so that you understand exactly what you're making from your total inventory. And focus on local advertisers that are going to be a good match for your content and your website and your products. Not all local advertisers are necessarily going to be a good match. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Patty. We do have a couple questions. Now is the time to put those in the questions box and we'll ask away. So the question I have is, are there video pre-roll ads available now in IQ?
No, not right now, but we are looking into it. It's on our radar, but right now we don't have any programmatic video ads, pre-roll ads.
So this is Stevie. Just a quick update. We've got a couple of new features that we've been working with Google on for video pre-roll. So I would say coming soon. It's definitely a large undertaking to make sure that everything works correctly and that our customers understand the options available to them. So we look for updates coming soon.
But don't let that stop you from locally sold pre-roll.
Absolutely.
We can do that.
Yeah. The biggest challenge with the programmatic pre-roll ads has been inventory. They just haven't had enough fill to make it worth your while. So for us to be able to package that across multiple networks has been a big challenge. There are some new features that are available now and some very large networks that are finally coming to the table, having more available. So we believe that it is promising and we're working. It's a big initiative for us this year to have that available. So as Stevie said, go ahead and stay tuned. We will, definitely have more information here in the coming months.
Great. Is the sticky ad on mobile tied only to an app-driven site or does it work on mobile browsers?
It's the one that we were looking at is on the mobile web.
So browsers.
Yeah.
What
So
are
it's a utility in blocks.
okay? What are the most common CPM rates for local?
I knew somebody was going to ask that. Everybody's got something different going. So keep that in mind. On the high end, there are websites that are charging between like $65 and $80 CPM for their local. I'm not recommending that, say that, but like I said, I think a lot of that is what are you putting into it and what are you offering, I guess is where I'm going. I'm hesitant to answer that because I can kind of give you a benchmark that at a minimum, if you're in the IQ program, what you're making on programmatic, your ECPM from your local should be at a minimum 5 times more than that, closer to 10. But again, it's hard to say, what's your audience? How many impressions do you have? How hyper-targeted is it? What are you offering? So, I'm always hesitant to, I don't want to duck the question, but at the same time, there really isn't a good answer to it either.
So I've got a little bit more insight into that. So I would say with your local, think about each add-on as an extra CPM. So if you say, okay, well, I can get a run-of-site ad and maybe that's $20 CPM. And then if they say, well, I want just the sports section, 25% increase, you're up to $25. If I want just the sports section, but I also want it to be only the very first ad on the page, that goes up again. If you want just the sports section and you want a sponsorship, you're up again. And then all of a sudden for your high impact sponsorship positions, like the ads at the very top of the page, the high impact banner reveal ad, maybe all of a sudden on a certain particular page at a sponsorship rate, you're looking at a CPM of $50, $60. So it's one of those things where you really got to figure out the value to your local advertisers, and then make sure that with every step you increase with targeting and ad positions, that you're increasing those rates along with that. It is extremely varied by market as well. So,
and Stevie makes an excellent point. Back to all display ad inventory is valuable, but not all of it is equally monetizable. So where it can be highly monetized, charge for it. That those things are valuable.
Yeah, and one of the things that we hear over and over, talking on both sides of the fence with experts in this field, is be sure to set a baseline price that, this is my minimum. And then as you make it more targeted, as you make it more valuable to them, and it could be, they have a big sale coming up, or they're sponsoring an event and it's very time sensitive, then, those are the things that help you increase what you get for that CPM. And should. And then, when you're setting that baseline price that you say, as an example, our minimum that we would charge is a $20 CPM. Make sure, back into that, what your costs are. You're trafficking that. You're doing the reporting. You have the salesperson out there. So you need to make enough to cover them plus margin, because you want it to be profitable. So there's nothing wrong with, working those angles to get back in. And remember, you are offering something that is very valuable to them. You have local eyeballs that these advertisers want. And, I'm going to mention the same thing, Stevie and Patty said, that making sure that you're selling them something they can't get elsewhere is extremely important too. And showing them that value with those different types of ads. When you visit web pages, where does your eyeball go, and what kind of ads are you seeing? And if you get those eyeballs, then yes, you should be rewarded for that, or have that as part of your CPM. So there is no one set price for things, and there never will be, because there's just so many different components and elements, all the way from geography to time to targeting, that come into play for those. But a range, we've had people tell us they're getting $185 CPMs. Now, that's going to be the top, that's going to be very, very premium stuff. But, you can back that all the way down. Our best advice to you is know what your costs are, make sure you have what you have to have minimum for margin, and then build up, because you are selling value.
You discussed metrics like CPA, CPM, SOV, etc. How do page views factor into website selling, or does it?
It not generally for what we're talking about right now. No, and so we kind of narrowed into display ads, which are going to be your cost per thousand. Where page views are going to come in is when I think with other things, like for example, maybe the let's say a survey or a contest or something like that. I think it's an especially useful metric once you bundle everything in together that you're making digitally. What's your revenue per page view? But specifically for display and video, it doesn't factor too much into pricing.
Yeah, the one area that you guys, I think Stevie, maybe Patty mentioned it before, was that if you say, I want to be the first ad that's shown, so then in that case, if that's you're only showing once, per user, then you would have to, kind of use that as a secondary mechanism or measure to know that you're going to need X number of page views in order to meet your impression count. So you can use it as a secondary measure too.
Also note, just quick, that if you're in Google Ad Manager, either a small instance or the IQ Program's 360 account, page views is not a metric that the ad server measures. So that's definitely a metric you're going to have to get out of a Google Analytics or a different analytics system. So it is important to know your page views and know how many ads per page you're serving so that you can calculate your impression volume, but it is going to come from a different metric system. So you'll have to work with your team on that and make sure that you're getting accurate page view information from the place where that detail lives for you.
Yeah, and if you're talking about page views too, the other things that are important is, what kind of, users that you come, how much, what's the traffic side of it? Because you could, it's that ratio of, you could have 10 users doing 1 million page views. It's a little out there, but just as an example. Or you could have 1 million users doing 1 page view. So depending on what that advertiser is trying to reach, those numbers come into play too. So a lot of those, you'll see people use the intersection of those metrics that you get from Google Analytics to help you, understand what kind of audience you bring into play. And, that's all part of what you package up as you approach these local advertisers, and, what is most important to them.
Okay. How should we deal with the growing usage of ad blockers?
That's where the better ad standards kind of comes in. The whole purpose of that is to slow down the adoption of ad blockers. I mean, clearly they're out there. There's no putting the cat back in that box. But a lot of the reason they're out there, and I'm about to date myself a little bit, but I can remember back when we had the X90 camera pop-ups, and they were everywhere. The fact of the matter is, we got some really obtrusive advertising out there, and we started with pop-up blockers, and so I think that kind of following along with some of these industry standards that are specifically meant to make sure the advertising is not just impactful for the advertiser trying to get their marketing message across, but also isn't, interfering with the user's experience and ability to consume the content, is probably the absolute best thing you can do. Keep in touch with what's going on with the better ad standards. Check to make sure that you're following best guidelines. I don't think people adopt ad blockers unless something happens to make them want to. But I don't know if that answers the question or not. But
to build on that, yes, there are people that are using ad blockers that are out there, and there's also programs that you can get that identify that they're using an ad blocker, throw them up a message and say, we see you're using an ad blocker, here's your choices. You can subscribe for this amount, or you can turn your ad blocker off on our site, whitelist us. And then that gets you, them paying for the content in one way or another.
I have a couple people who want to do video not pre-roll. Any thoughts on pricing that?
So video not pre-roll is something that I get asked about a lot. So I think, unless I'm wrong, what we're talking about is kind of in banner video.
Correct.
So the first thing you have to understand is that you've got to have a player around video. So you can't just upload a video to Google Ad Manager and have it play. So there's some services out there that will put a wrapper around it for you. If you've got somebody running around that's really good at HTML5 that can do that, I would say definitely that's going to be a premium spot. I would also say definitely make sure that those kind of ads are in line with the better ad standards. No auto audio, only user initiated audio, and whatever else might need to be taken into account to make sure that you don't run afoul of the better ad standards.
Yeah, it shouldn't overlay other content.
Yes.
Yeah, and as for pricing, what we've heard, people on the local level have charged is 3 to 5 times what they charge for display. Again, it's all going to depend on, how, where you put it, what is the campaign regarding, but that gives you kind of a benchmark. And And this is, especially on a local or direct sold area, it is probably a lot more fluid in pricing. It's because of its newness and so another thing to consider, are you helping with the production of that video ad? And those are additional things that you'd want to charge for. Are they doing it all on their own with some marketing firm and all you're doing is using it, or all you're doing, but you're giving them the place on the page and the eyeballs, and so all those would factor into what you price as well.
Yeah, post video, there might be, so when you're kind of figuring out the costs for running it, there might be associated extra costs to running an embedded video ad that you'll need to factor in.
Yeah, who's storing it? Where's it being run from? Because those come into play too as pricing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Make sure, because even Google Ad Manager has some additional serving fees per cost per thousand on video ads if they're hosted within the server. So just making sure you've got all the costs in order before you give out that price. Again, the importance Teresa mentioned of backing into that, making sure that you are actually selling a profitable advertisement.
Okay. Can in-store programmatic ads via the automatic ad settings show 320 by 50 ads now on mobile devices, or are these ads only at 300 by 250 ads across the board?
Stevie, I'm going to let you take that one because I think you've been working on this more than I have.
So I would say to the person asking that question, we can probably follow up with that. There are multiple different ways to make the automatic ad position work, but we do have some size limitations. I know that we're working on some updates to it, but I don't have the information at my fingertips to know exactly when those are going to be available. So if that user wants to send an email to the ad ops at TownNews,
enter a support ticket, and we can take it from there. So just have them enter a support ticket.
Yep.
Okay.
We do have some stuff in the works to update that somewhat, but in the meantime, there's other stuff we can do.
Yeah, and again, it's a little tricky in that area because it depends on what kind of blocks you're using and what you're using also in the automatic ads area and your settings. So unfortunately, just because of the sophistication right now and working more to make it much more useful, there's a little hair on it, but it's nothing we can't get through with a conversation.
Okay.
Yep.
How can we get reports with graphs, charts, ad copy, reminders that campaigns are ending? Are those things available?
Let me think. So graphs, you're going to have to excuse me. I'm primarily familiar with Google Ad Manager 360. So we have a plugin now, Data Studio, that will allow you to pull that stuff in and create graphs. That we can absolutely set you up if you're on our Google Ad Manager 360. We can absolutely set you up with access so you can play around with it and kind of lay that data out any way you like. Sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Does it have automated reminders for when a campaign is ending? So you can email the sales rep a couple weeks before?
Go ahead.
So Google Ad Manager itself does not have campaign ending reminders. There's no way for it to email or send notifications based on the behavior of a particular ad. What it does have is different filters that you can build that will show you campaigns that are ending soon. And those are things that are available with, I believe, any instance of Google Ad Manager. And you should be able to create a filter based on the user who entered the ad and the end dates of those ads and ones that are ending soon or have recently ended. That's probably going to be the best way, but there's no notification system set up there.
And you could possibly set up I know that you can select start and end dates to appear on reports that you can schedule for automatic delivery, and that wouldn't be quite all the way, but you could schedule a report that included the start and the end dates that would go out once a week. Now, I don't know, you couldn't narrow it down, I don't think, to a certain date range, but that would be an automated way to say, here's what's running, check to make sure your campaigns aren't ending.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
There's some options there. There's no automatic notification settings, but there's definitely some options there. That's another thing where if somebody would need, somebody that's in the IQ program wants some additional training there, we can definitely enter a support ticket and get that moving forward. But there's a couple of different options.
So a follow-up question on automatic ads. Does it work with Google Ad Manager 360? The automatic.
Yes.
oh, yeah.
Okay. In a market of approximately 250,000 people, is there a benchmark for impressions that we should be striving for per day, per week, or per month?
It is a tough question to answer. I mean, if I've got a local parenting site, for example, I'm appealing to, in a city of 250,000, how many of those are parents, and how many of those have children that are of an age where they would be on my website looking for things to do with their kids. So, it's kind of an open-ended question, I guess, is where I'm
Yeah,
at.
I think you'd need more detail than that. But, again, if that's something that you would like some ballparks and want to work with us on, go ahead and enter a ticket, and we can see what we can, give you and have maybe a further discussion would be helpful to you to get you to that benchmark. So I think there's ways. I'm not sure that's a question that we, have enough to answer here. And, maybe that's an area then that we can follow on here with like a blog post of, here's just an example and, have that information. So then the rest of you, if you're interested, can benefit as well.
Follow up to the sticky ad on mobile. Is that a position in the block site?
It's a utility region in blocks. So under utility regions, there is an area that's called all pages, and you can put an ad block in there for that sticky anchor on mobile. And then when you set it up, of course, you just want to make sure that it's visible. If you only want it on mobile, you'll want to make sure that it's only set up for like a 320 by 50. And if you send in a support ticket, we can help you with that too. I'm always happy to help people set up those mobile sticky ads. I think they're brilliant. And they're really easy to do.
Documentation on how to set up these as well. Step-by-step document that you can find on help.blackcms.com today. That just kind of outlines the step-by-step process of getting a sticky footer and sticky anchor position ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's good too. Is help.blockcms.com and just do how to add a sticky ad, and you would get the documentation, the setup steps for that. That would be helpful to you as well. And if you need anything additional after that, you can enter a support ticket. But yes, they definitely are available. The wording, as Patty pointed out, is utility region. So that would help you as well.
Okay. That appears to be all the questions that we have. If you've got any, sneak them in now. There are many ways to stay connected with us. As they mentioned, our documentation is at help.blockcms.com. You can find more information there. You can enter a support ticket or call 1-800-293-9576 or visit support.townnews.com. Our partner community is a great place to share ideas, ask questions of how everybody else is doing. Community.townnews.com. You can check out the status of our servers and service at townnews.status.io. You can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. And you can come see us at the Mega Conference here at the end of February.
And I just want to add one more point too, is that we're planning on having, a couple more webinars for our people that are using our IQ program that will, give you some more pointers as we drill down into reporting and additional items with, stats and viewability and how you track things as well. So stay tuned for that. And, that is another area that we think we can help a lot of you out with, at least information-wise, and to get your points across.
So you can go to our website, townnews.com. On the news page, you can sign up for one of our many newsletters, and you'll see one on there for webinar announcements. Make sure you're signed up for that to get all of the emails. And it doesn't look like we have any other questions come in. So Stevie, Patty, Teresa, thank you so much for the information. And thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you next time.